Hello and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the situation around Pisky for the 14th of August, and this is only really about Pisky and to a certain extent Marinka. I don't want to get into all the other fronts. I'll talk about those in a separate video because there is some news and some forecasting that I want to make. I want to make some analysis specifically on this town over here because there's been a lot of news from here, and it was more of the one of the more highly contested towns over the past few weeks. So we all know how it started with the Russians entering Pisky, and they first of all took the town hall building over here, and then they launched the thermobaric rockets towards this school over here, and there was a lot of fighting around this apartment complex over here, and in the Donetsk Institute of Plant Industry. And of course, I have links to some footage from there if you're interested. You can look in my map, which I'm going to really embellish in a few days. Now, I talked about there being fighting around the kindergarten yesterday, but by now Russia has taken over the kindergarten, and they've also taken over basically all the high-rise buildings, like the ones over here, where Ukraine was really able to hide in the top floors and use that as a staging ground for their own like anti-tank or anti-infantry attacks. Like they had a lot of javelins and the machine guns that were found later on and were captured by the Russians, and they have footage of this. So now, what remains under Ukrainian control in this town is this road over here called Stepova Street, and you just have some like residential buildings, not even buildings, houses. They're very small, and of course you have some bushes that are still under Ukrainian control technically. But Russia, they could easily clear this out over here. And the one last major complex or garrison that's under the Ukrainian control, to my knowledge, is this plant over here. This is the plant industry. Not to be confused with this plant over here. This is like a plant breeding station, so I'm gonna write that down after the video. But to my knowledge, it is under Ukrainian control as of now. But not to get too much into the weeds, besides that, we also have these roads over here and some agricultural land, which will be taken pretty easily if it hasn't been taken already, because probably Russia is clearing out these places right now, and Ukraine has already withdrawn their forces from here. So, for all intents and purposes, the town is really under the Russian control. And I did talk about what the new line of defense could be for the Ukrainians. It could be along this road over here. I don't think they'll be able to hold it for long, especially given the fact that Russia is now launching new attacks on the town here, Vodiane, and on Prvomaiske. More importantly, there have been strikes on Krasnohorivka, but my main focus is on Pisky, and around Pisky we have Nevelske. And Nevelske, you do have these smaller houses, no real apartments that can be used to hide Ukrainian troops. I would say that this is very similar to the buildings or houses in Stepova Street. So it shouldn't take that long to clear, to be cleared out. And you do have the 56th Mechanized Brigade around here in the area of Pisky and Nevelske. But they actually started deserting without any approval from the higher-ups, the top brass of the Ukrainian military. And they were fleeing in the direction of Dnipro. So as a result of this, the mass desertions which occurred during the fighting in Pisky within the three companies that are left in the brigade, and those companies are very battered, by the way. On paper, they look like they're intact, but they are heavily battered, obviously, by the urban fighting. So Ukraine, they deployed about 100 right sector militants to the area of Yasno Brodivka, which is pretty close to the front lines. It's around here. So it is sort of far away, but not that far away. The point of this is so these right sector troops, they can actually catch the deserters and probably jail them or bring them back into the fold and fight in the military, of course. And maybe potentially those right sector troops would be sent to reinforce the front line later on, along with some National Guards forces and police forces that are operating in the area. Because Russia is assaulting Novelske, and once they do take this part of the town, they're going to advance along here and occupy this agricultural area, which would be more difficult, but it shouldn't be that much of a hassle. There was footage of Russian troops operating in these open fields around here, so it is safe to say that this is probably how the front line looks like. Novelske hasn't fallen yet, but it probably will. And then once it does, what will be the next line of defense for Ukraine? Because Novelske, it is sort of a linchpin where they could sort of have a buffer in between the Russian forces and the settlements of Pervomaiske and Nitalove. The next line could probably be around these bushes over here. It could give them some cover potentially, but missiles and tanks, they can quickly overrun these bushes and quickly destroy the Ukrainian garrison around here. You do have some houses that can probably be used to hold up the Russians for a few hours probably. You have this other agricultural area that can be utilized. So you do have this like a ring of defensive barriers that could probably be utilized for some hours, maybe a day, but it would not be sufficient, especially under the heavy artillery fire of the Russians, which is overwhelming the Ukrainians. And then once they do overrun these positions around here and the lakes too, because there are some lakes that can probably be used as defensive positions, you could see this attack on Nitalove from the south, as well as on Pervomaiske from the south. And since Pervomaiske is sort of a long town, it is connected to Nitalove. They are sort of one and the same sort of settlement. Those two could fall pretty quickly, and you could see a situation wherein we have a repeat of the Popasna salient and the Popasna breakthrough. So I want to talk about that for a second and explain what happened over there to everyone who might have forgotten about it. So in Popasna, which is around here, this town over here, it is huge in comparison to some of the other towns that we've been talking about, like Marinka, Pisky. So it is understandable why it took so long, given the fact that there was so much urban fighting, and now much of the town is very leveled in reminiscent of Pisky. Basically, you had the fighting around the train station area, and Russia was able to break through this area, and they pushed into the final western outskirts of the town, and they were able to tap into this advantage of them securing the heights of Popasna and take fire control of all these other regions around Popasna, all these hamlets like Druzhba, and then they used their Chechen and paratroopers to attack Alexandropolia, and then eventually they reached Komishuvaka. In Komishuvaka, that was important in the effort to take over Zolota and Hirske, which happened later on, a few months later. The main force, though, it was going towards the west in the direction of Soledar, and they, of course, took over the hamlet over here, Druzhba, and they reached Pilipshatine. And then the paratroopers, they landed in Pilia, Volodymyrivka, and they even reached as far as Stryapivka and Novokamyanka. So you had this huge bulge in the front lines which was centered around Popasna, and it was reaching all the way to here. And that forced the Ukrainians to withdraw from their positions along the Donetsk-Luhansk border towards the Bakhmut-Soledar line. They had to withdraw from these fields on the eastern side of this E40 road. And they eventually gave up Kleinove, Pokrovske, and now, of course, you have the battles in Soledar. So that was a sort of a domino effect that was caused by the breakthrough in Popasna, which was a very heavily fortified town. There were battles there going on in 2014. So, yeah, they really did put up a very fierce urban battle, and the fortifications around the town were also very fierce. So that's basically the same as Pisky, just that Pisky is even closer to Donetsk, which is the main hub of fighting, which just made it even more intense, despite the fact that the town was so small. So where I'm going with all of this, by talking about Popasna, is that you could see a similar breakthrough now if you utilize the Chechens and the VDV troops. Because Chechens, they've taken like a 1 month pause to recuperate from the battles in Lysychansk, Severodonetsk, which were very fierce. So I do understand why they would have to take this time to really recuperate. By now, most of them should be ready for another attack. And you did see some of them in Soledar, admittedly. But I am sure that some of them are operating in the Pisky area. And if they're not, they really should be going there. Same thing with the VDV, the paratroopers. They haven't really seen much fighting as of recently, so they should be sent to Pisky. And there are reports of more Chechen volunteers being sent to the front lines. So this might be their first test of actually fighting. So first of all, they need to get this road juncture fully secured. There's fighting around here right now. And then you take the plant, this breeding plant station. You advance along these lakes around here as fast as possible with the paratroopers, securing Porvomaiske and pushing through Nevelske into Netalove at a rate in which this line around here, this road, is made superfluous, and Vodiane can be quickly taken over. And then using the positions around the mine shaft over here that was taken, Opitny would also be attacked from all sides, and it would make the lakes that are surrounding it not really an important point of defense for the Ukrainians, because they wouldn't have time to utilize it. So then you would have this breakthrough, which could lead towards Karlivka. It could lead potentially towards Avdiivka, because they would secure all of these areas around here, and then they could start shifting their focus to the east and cutting off the supply lines for the Avdiivka garrison and their escape route. And this was talked about a lot by DPR forces. They were saying there's going to be no battle in Avdiivka, because think about it. If there was a battle in Pisky that lasted several weeks to take such a small town, and Avdiivka is like many, many times bigger, and it is just as fortified, if not more, at this point, there's no way it would be a fruitful endeavor for the Russians. They would have to suffer many casualties. So it is possible that they now go forward, attack from here, reach this plant in the northern part of Avdiivka, and coordinate an assault with the troops fighting in Krasnohorivka. That is all totally possible, and it would break down the main Ukrainian defensive line. I am sure that they do have more fortifications along the rest of the line of Donetsk, especially in areas such as Kurakove, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and Pokrovsk. They probably do have a lot of fortifications set up, but nothing like the original Minsk Accord ceasefire lines. In Marinka, which is connected to Pisky in a way because it's on the same front line, the same thing could probably happen. We already have the first line of supplies between Krasnohorivka and Marinka cut off, and the line between Marinka and Novomikhalivka is also cut off. So now you're seeing this attack by Russia towards Pobjeda, which is another small hamlet. Really shouldn't have trouble taking over. Look, it's just 4 small blocks, and then this place. It should be easily taken, and then all the supplies would be cut off for this small chain of towns situated along here. And you could see a coordinated assault with the garrison in Pavlivka and Vuhledar, which is mainly DPR forces around here, but you do have Russian artillery supporting them. And you could see a push northwards towards these small bodies of water and all these chains of towns, which are all connected. But they are small to such an extent where it wouldn't be that difficult. It's not the same as taking Pisky, given the fact that Pisky does have all these apartments and these are just houses. And then you'd have this advance along the open fields, which would eventually culminate in a battle around Kurakove, which is also very fortified. And it's along the Vovcha River, which could be used as another barrier of defense. In Marinka, the 66th Mechanized Brigade is starting to abandon their positions. They're the force that is defending the AFU forces. And their rear base is around this town called Stary Terny, which I am pretty sure is located around here. But I do apologize for not finding it. Okay, here it is. Stary Terny, this place. There's not much here, but this is the rear base for 56th and 66th Brigades, whatever's left of them, of course. And the base was heavily damaged in Russian assaults. Not sure if it was a strike or artillery, but either way, it was attacked, at least according to the Russians. On TASS, they reported that 100 troops were eliminated and 10 pieces of military hardware were also destroyed in that attack. So you are seeing the supply lines also being targeted and the command posts and everything. So it is important to look out for that. Another important town is Beretsky, where there's being a lot of coordination between different brigades, because it is sort of this hub where, of course, the troops from Dnipro are being sent in. So you do have several points of very high concentration of AFU supplies and command centers, such as Pavlohrad. That's one place. And then, of course, Pokrovsk, as I talked about before. And then this entire area around Kurakove is another place that's much closer to the front line that is being used by Ukraine, which will be a target. I would say after Avdiivka falls, it will be the another target of the Russians, but they'd also have to go over Toretsk in New York, of course. That's another thing. But that's a story for a different day. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you later.